Honorable Sri Arif Mohammad Khan Sahab, Governor of Bihar, author of the book, my colleague Sri Sanjeev Chopra, Sri Adarsh Shastri, Shekhar Gupta, Dr. Aishwarya Pandit, dignitaries sitting in the audience, Sri Prem Prakash ji, Sri Ajay Chaudhary, Sri Ravi Misra, ladies and gentlemen. It's my proud privilege to extend a very warm welcome to His Excellency Sri Arif Mohammad Khan, who has very kindly accepted our invitation to be the chief guest today here to unveil the book, The Great Conciliator, authored by Sri Sanjeev Chopra. It is always a treat to the ears and mind to hear Arif Saab. He is indeed a great scholar, a great speaker. We all still remember the speeches that he delivered as Member of Parliament, as a minister in the Parliament. How can one forget his frank way of expressing his views, his historical speech that he made on the occasion of this Sahabanu controversy still reverberates, in our mind. The book on Shastriji, titled The Great Conciliator, written by Sri Sanjeev Chopra, indeed is a true tribute to a great son of India. Shastriji, when he became Prime Minister of the country, we are all young school students. As we all know, he came from a very humble background and lived his life that way throughout. He also lived, not only he faced poverty, but also lived poverty. And because of his nature, because of his approach, because of his honesty, he rose to become Prime Minister of this great country. And that too at a time when the country has suffered a huge defeat at the hand of China just a couple of years back. The country was facing acute, food shortage. And then we had to also face an aggression from Pakistan in 1965. At that time, it was definitely a very, challenging task for the Prime Minister of the country to steer clear the nation. And Shastriji not only, discharge his duties and responsibilities as a Prime Minister to the best of his ability and to the best of satisfaction of the countrymen, but he also steered us from this crisis situation. Speakers, of course, are going to speak more in details about Shastriji, but I would only like to say that many things that he did ultimately proved to be a game changer for the country. The important ones being the Green Revolution, the White Revolution. Many people do not know. I did not know till I, started working in the Karnataka Milk Federation that it is Shastriji's visit to Amul, where he saw the great work being done by Dr. Kurian in, promoting this milk revolution, and also to save the farmers, milk farmers, from the exploitation of middlemen. That at his encouragement, Dr. Kurian set up the National Dairy Development Board, which has done a wonderful service for the country throughout. As a provisioner of IAS in 1976, when we were undergoing training, our director used to be Dr. Sri Rajeshwar Prasad, who had worked as a private secretary to Lal Bahadur Shastri for almost 7 years during his premiership as well. Every year, he would be, delivering a talk to us on the birthday of Lal Bahadur Shastri on his life and experience that he had with Shastri. It used to be such a heart-rendering kind of, experience for us to listen about the person whom we all endured. I still remember as a school student, when we were facing the food crisis all over the country, Shastri just gave a call to the countrymen that let us give up our one meal in a week. The whole nation, without any murmuring, gave up, morning, the lunch on the Mondays, so that the food gain could be, conserved. and that could be given out to the poorer people who are not having food grains, etc. Now this kind of leadership, this kind of appeal, from political leaders, from the national leaders, how many of us follow nowadays? Things have really completely changed. I still remember when I went to Allahabad University in 1969 for my education, on the walls of one of the buildings in Chowk area, there was a graffiti written, शास्त्री जी को वोट दीजिए. ये 1962 के टाइम का लिखा हुआ था. I remember other several memories which I can recall in relating to Shastri ji, which really motivated all of us to live a life dedicated to the nation. I would like to, on this occasion, immensely compliment my colleague Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, who has put in a lot of efforts in bringing out his book. There have been many directors of Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy of Administration in Missouri. Everybody had naturally, what should I say, tremendous amount of praise for Shastri ji, but none of them could, have the perseverance of collecting materials and writing such a book, because there are several books on many leaders, but on Shastri ji we do not find so much of, literature available. So in that direction, I would say that for the nation as a whole, Sanjeev has done a human service by writing this book. On this occasion, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to His Excellency Sri Arif Muhammad Khan Sahib for being with us here today and agreeing to unveil this book. Hearty welcome to you, sir. I also welcome the other speakers, Sri Adarsh Shastri, Sri Shekhar Gupta, Dr. Aishwarya Pandit, and of course our colleague Dr. Sanjeev Chopra. A warm welcome to Sri Prem Prakash ji, who has worked with Shastri ji and he was with him at Tashkent. He is amidst us here. Warm welcome to Sri Ajay Chaudhary ji, Sri Ravi Mishra, and to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, on this occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Srivastava-ji, for laying the foundation for what promises to be an intellectually enriching evening. Next, we are privileged to hear from the author himself, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, a scholar of remarkable erudition, who will share what's inspired him to pen the great conciliator and why Lal Bahadur Shastriji's leadership continues to hold relevance today. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you very much, Dr. Munshi. Honorable Shri Arif Muhammad Khan ji, the Governor of Bihar, and an inspiration for all of us. In fact, when he was visiting the academy at that time, I told him that I'll be writing on Shastri ji, and he said, when you write it, let me know, and I'll come to launch your book. So thank you very much, sir. I have kept my promise, and you've kept your promise, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us. Mr. Shekhar Gupta, an icon, a person whom everybody knows. Everybody wants to, know. And thank you very much, sir, for walking the talk and for, leading the print, online, offline, and, the national interest in the real sense of the term. Thank you very much for being here. My friend Aishwarya Pandit, who's author, scholar, and has written some very wonderful books, and of course Adarsh Shastri ji. Thank you, Adarsh ji, for joining us. In fact, he had to cut short his program. He was supposed to be in Calcutta, but at the request of his distinguished father, Mr. Anil Shastri ji, he's agreed to come. Members of the Lal Bahadur Shastri family who've extended a lot of their support and cooperation in writing this book, because writing a book of this nature is not possible unless the family opens its heart out. And Mr. Anil Shastri and Manju Shastri ji really opened their heart out. I had the occasion of meeting Sunil Shastri ji. So that's all made a lot of difference. I'm very grateful that people as distinguished as Mr. Prem Prakash ji are here. Mr. Ajay Chaudhary, thank you very much for endorsing the book. We have with us my dear friend Ravi Mishra from the Prime Minister's Memorial Library, because that library is the repository, the actual repository of, where you can get all the material, not only on Shastriji, but on all Prime Ministers of the country. And I think it's a great resource, a resource that needs to be acknowledged and read. So friend, let's come to the point. Governor Sahib has been kind enough to give us some leeway on time. So it's not as strict a program as was approved. So thank you very much, sir. Only governors can have this liberty of giving us this grace. So thank you, sir, for being as gracious as you always are. And for speakers, the gift of time is the best gift that you can give, sir. So for speakers, the best gift is the gift of time. So thank you so much. So friends, the question often comes up that why a book on Shastriji? And as I mentioned, when I took over charge as the director of the academy on 1st January 2019, that was a dream job for me. I always wanted to be the director of the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy. I went there, and after paying floral tributes to Sardar Patel, who is actually the Bhisham Pitama for the civil services, I went to the Gandhi Smriti library of the academy, and I was looking at all the books that are there in our library. So we've got 2 million books in our library. 2 lakh books in our library. 2 million, we won't have the space, but 2 lakh books in our library. But the number of books on Shastriji were not more than a score. There were not more than 20 books on Lal Bahadur Shastri, the person on whom the academy is named. And that was in contrast to the books on Mr. Nehru, on Mrs. Gandhi, collected works of Mahatma Gandhi are there. So I thought, let's just put some time and effort into studying the life of Lal Bahadur Shastriji. 3 of my very distinguished predecessors in the IAS, Mr. Rajeshwar Prasad, Mr. L.P. Singh, and Mr. C.P. Srivastav, who worked with him, have written about him, but they have written about the time that they spent with him. But I wanted to understand the time and the space and the people and the events which made Lal Bahadur Shastri. Because you have to situate the person in the times. And the times were 1900. And when you read the speeches of the Congress presidents of 1900 to 1940s, you see the way the country was transitioning. From a time in 1900 when Lord Curzon was being welcomed as the greatest star on the Indian firmament, to the time when when the disillusionment set in because of 1903, the famine that took place, the partition of Bengal, the decline started. And then, of course, we see 1915, we see Mahatma Gandhi's entry on the scene. So all these are impacts. This time has a great impact on individuals. So an individual is not a product of himself. An individual is a product of his time. An individual is also a product of the place that he lives in, but a place itself is a product of the time. So for instance, when we talk of Mughal Sarai, Mughal Sarai, the great railway junction. So why did that railway junction come up? What was it used for? So all these things came up. Then we come to Benares, the city where he grew up. Benares, what a great city. That was the time when BHU was being made, when Kashi Vidyapeeth was being made, when all these things were happening. So again, Benares. Then he goes to Lahore, a city about which we know little, and something on which our historical records are also not that great, because we've lost some of those records in transition. And then Allahabad, then Lucknow, and then finally New Delhi. So these are the places where Shastriji lived and worked, and I've tried to capture some of these places, the nuances of these places. I've tried to look at people. Ammaji, his mother, a great influence on him. Lalitaji, his wife, and the great reconciliation that he had to do between his mother and his wife. His mother was very conservative, but very bold at some levels. She did not want Lalitaji to be out and picket the foreign cloth, but he had to reconcile that. So Shastriji's life is actually a life of reconciliation. I'm reconciling many, many, many different interests. And that's what he did with Mr. Purushottam Das Tandon and Jawaharlal Nehru. He was fond of both of them. Both of them were also equally fond of him. So I'll not take too much time, but that's what I wanted to convey, that this is how the whole aspect of conciliation that came up. Friends, till 1930, after 1935, a lot is known about his life, because by then he had become a legislator. He was a member of he was the president of the Allahabad District Congress Committee. But the greatest contribution to my mind, one of the greatest contributions, was the Congress Agrarian Committee Reforms Report, which he wrote in 1935. The foundations of the CSCP, the foundations of MG Narega, the foundations of right to work, the right to food, all of them we find in this thing. And another very important point about Shastriji is that he did not speak emotionally. He spoke on empirical facts. Everything that he wrote was based on facts. You read the report, you'll find that there were 4.96 crore people in UP at that time. 12 lakh was the number of people who had land. These are the number of people who had land in excess. This was the number of tenants. And so it's a very detailed report. And therefore, whatever Shastriji wrote was something which was out of the ordinary. General Pannu is here, who's helped me reconstruct the 1962 and the 1965 episodes, especially the 1965 episode. The first person, I mean, who led the country from debacle to resurgence. I mean, that's the name of Mr. R.D. Pradhan's book on how we were able to, to actually show that we are a strong nation on the back of Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, an absolutely stirring slogan which galvanized the country. And I must mention here that it was Ranjit Singh who first went and got back the, went to Kabul and got back the gates of Golden Temple and Somnath. But the first person in India who was heading the Republic of India and crossed the borders of India was actually Lal Bahadur Shastri. So I think he is the first person who actually, because of whom we actually were able to fly the national flag on several police stations in Lahore and the Sialkot sectors. Brigadier Sukhjit Singh was then a major, working with him in the Sialkot sector. He would have been here, but he couldn't have been here. Very grateful that Brigadier Sukhjit Singh and Mr. Prem Prakash ji, two people who have actually worked with Mr. Shastri, are here with us today, and we're really honored. A lot is, I won't take too much time. In spite of your grace, sir, I'll close at this point of time. 2-3 things I want to point out. One, the myth of the Indian Railways. As you go, you'll see this chapter. There's a chapter, my favorite chapter is Shastri's India versus Ayub's Pakistan. That's a chapter which tells us that it is not economic growth or the GDP growth which matters. It is the conciliation, it is the internal strength of a country which is far more important than GDP figures, which is what India was having, because we were recognizing linguistic diversity. We were recognizing linguistic diversity, whereas Pakistan was curbing its linguistic diversity by making one unit for the East and one unit for the West, and thereby that, I think, was the great difference, the great conciliation. Shastriji taught us that whether you agree or do not agree, you must listen. Listening is the most important aspect in any conversation. Not getting convinced, not being convinced, but listening. And I think that's a great tribute. He was also a great poet when he wrote poetry. And, these are the lines which he wrote when his daughter, Pushpe, she had died. He writes this on behalf of his wife. He says, क्या यही खेल इस निष्ठुर नियति का जो तुमने भी खेला है, यह कहकर बंधन छोड़ चली कि जग तो एक झमेला है. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chopra, for that fascinating insight into your work. And now the moment we have all been waiting for, the unveiling of the great conciliator. It's our honor to invite His Excellency Shri Arif Muhammad Khan Sahab, Honorable Governor of Bihar, to officially unveil the book. Joining him on stage will be eminent personalities including Shri Adarsh Shastri, Shri Shekhar Gupta, Dr. Aishwarya Pandit, along with esteemed guests Shri K.N. Srivastava, Shri Sunil Shastri, Shri Ravi Mishra, Srimati Rashmi Chopra, Shri Ajay Chaudhary, Shri Prem Prakash and Ms. Mekhla Murthy. Rashmi ji. Okay, she's there. Thank you, Your Excellency, and all our distinguished guests for making this special moment. Thank you very much.
Very good.
We now turn to the reflections of three distinguished speakers who will share their insights on this remarkable book. Shri Adarsh Shastri, former legislator and social entrepreneur, Dr. Aishwarya Pandit, distinguished scholar, and Shri Shekhar Gupta, renowned journalist and commentator, who will offer their perspectives on the book's central themes, Shastriji's enduring legacy, and the intricate political landscape of his time. I would first invite Shri Adarsh Shastri.
Thank you once again, and congratulations, Sanjeev Chopra ji, for an amazing achievement and an amazing book for the ages, for posterity. Honorable Governor of Bihar, Arif Mohammad Khan Sahab, Ajay Chaudhary ji, Dr. Aishwarya Pandit ji, T.N. Shrivastava ji, Shekhar Gupta ji, Sunil Shastri ji, Meera Shastri ji, members of the audience. It is an honor for me to be here today, as Sanjeev ji mentioned, to cut short my visit to Calcutta and be here and try and fill in shoes of my father Anil Shastri ji, which are anyway very big, and on top of that try and comment on my grandfather Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, in front of whom I think I do not stand a chance in size. But I had the opportunity of going through the book, of reading the book, and I was amazed at the detailing, at the clarity, at the level of articulation which I have never seen as yet on a book on Shastri ji, for sure. And I was born much after Shastri ji passed away, heard so much about him from my father, from Sunil Shastri ji, from my grandmother. But I think Sanjeev Chopra ji's book has brought about a new light on Shastri ji's life, which I think is extremely, extremely relevant for the times to come. It is actually amazing that for a person, for a statesman who passed away almost 60 years back, the relevance that Shastriji's thought, the relevance that Shastriji's ideals, the relevance of his vision still rings true after so many years of his passing. And more importantly, with such a short stint of just about 19 months, he was able to leave an imprint on India, on our history, on our country's fabric, which will be remembered for ages. And I think Sanjeev ji has beautifully captured that emotion and those facts and figures, and the amount of research that has gone into the book. I truly believe that Sanjeev ji, you need an outstanding salute from all of us here to have been able to bring out so much facts and so much information about Shastri ji, which a lot of us in the family also had no clue about. What is also amazing is, and like mentioned by Shrivastava Sahab also, a lot of information is available about Shastri ji from his ministerial and prime ministerial time. But what shaped the mettle of that man is something which was not available for any of us. And I think Sanjeev ji has done a great favor to all of us, and for generations which are going to come after us, for students of history, of politics, of public policy, and people of India in general and the world, to have been able to come out with information and light of a person who shaped India's destiny with over just 19 months as Prime Minister. When Shastri ji became Prime Minister, India was going through tumultuous times, a dark time. We were facing crisis on the food front, crisis on the external border front, crisis on the global front. And a man who was even shorter than where I stand in front of you. Maybe he was 5 feet 2 inches, and was pretty much regarded very lightly, possibly by media and by the international forums. Was able to prove himself in those 19 months of his decisive leadership, and the foundation of many of these things which we now come to acknowledge as a given, which happened during his time. The idea of self-reliance, the idea of Make in India, the idea of not being dependent and being aligned, multi-aligned, whether it is to other global powers or whether it is within the country, is something that we discuss in classrooms, we discuss in newspaper editorials today. But I think he lived that during the times that he was Prime Minister and during his various roles as Minister in the Government of India. And Sanjeev ji has beautifully captured those emotions, and I congratulate and commend him for this amazing piece of work that he has brought out. And I really was touched by reading so many of those episodes and chapters which pertain to his early life, what made him made those difficult choices at that time, coming from a very, very simple and a very, very humble background. And from there to be able to rise to the office of Prime Minister with sheer determination, humility, is something which I think is for all of us to not only acknowledge, but for all of us to really try and understand. I think through the book, not only have we all learned about Shastri ji, but I think also a lot about the power, the inspiration behind him. Lalita Shastri ji, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, Shastri ji's mother, and a lot of the steel in him could have only have happened with the active support of his mother and his wife. And that also Sanjeev ji has brought out very beautifully in the book. And I keep hearing a lot of anecdotes about Shastri ji from elders at home, from my grandmother in the past, and a lot of it has been mentioned by Sanjeev ji in the book as well. And a couple of things which are mentioned in the book, and which I have some bit information on, was like when you mentioned about his visit to Anand. Shastri ji was such a pragmatist that when he wanted the Amul story to be replicated across India, he asked Dr. Kurian to set up this Amul experiment, and NDDB was formed. And I think my father or my uncle told me this, that when he said, he asked Kurian to head the NDDB and come to Delhi, and he said, I have only one condition. And Kurian said to Shastri ji that I have only one condition, and the condition was that the National Dairy Development Board should not be headquartered in Delhi, but it should be done in Anand. Because when Shastri ji asked him why, Kurian Sahab replied that a lot of work gets undone or doesn't get done by being in Delhi, but I will be able to accomplish a lot of work here in Anand. And that evening itself, the decision was made to headquarter the National Development Board in Anand. And many such instances, and just one last snippet about Shastri ji, and his wit, which I always remember, and I find it to be very inspirational. Though it was made as a witty statement when he was going to Tashkent for the peace accord with Pakistan. But he was asked, and I'm sure those who were close to him and worked with him would have known this. But I believe Sanjeev ji, a lot of press people at Palam Airport then asked him that you're going to Tashkent to meet and sign an agreement with Ayub Khan, the President of Pakistan. And Ayub Khan is 6 feet 2 inches tall, and Shastri ji was 5 feet 2 inches. And Shastri ji was asked that how are you going to talk and how are you going to finalize an agreement with Ayub Khan, who's 6 feet 2. And Shastri ji smiled, and his own demeanor of self-respect and wit replied कि जब मैं अयूब खान से बात करूँगा तो मैं सर उठा के बात करूंगा और वो सर झुका के बात करेंगे. So that I think is the beauty what Sanjeev ji has beautifully brought out in this book. And once again, congratulations on my behalf, on behalf of the entire Shastri family, on behalf of my father Anil Shastri ji, my uncle Sunil Shastri ji. Very, very deeply honored and a great sense of gratitude for bringing out this book, which was in a much, much needed space for all of us to understand about Shastri ji. And the amazing thing is that the more young people I meet, those who were born much after Shastri ji passed away, the more the interest about Shastri ji's life and times, and this will serve as an inspiration for many to rise in the service of our country. Thank you, Sanjeev ji. Thank you once again.
Good evening. I would like to thank the Honorable Chief Guest, His Excellency the Governor of Bihar, Shri Arif Mohammad Khan, for taking out time for this book. He's always been a very good supporter of academic pursuits and really different books. The members of the at the stage, and also most importantly Sanjeev Chopra ji, who kind of gave me this opportunity to kind of be a discussant of the book. I must confess, I did not, before I read the book, I did not know much about our former Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri ji. Primarily because of reasons already slated here by the other people at the panel, which was largely the paucity of books being written on him, and the number of works were very limited, and no one had really taken the cudgels to actually get the material together, put it all under one book and manuscript, and kind of work towards it diligently. So that is why my most heartfelt congratulations to Sanjeev Chopra ji for achieving this this really great feat. And I think to get the material together and to work on it requires a kind of perseverance which is very limited these days. Now, reflecting on the book, as I started reading about the former Prime Minister, what struck me as that the reasons, at least that was my understanding, that the reasons for limited books on the subject is also because of the period. His predecessor, Jawaharlal Nehru, was this overarching personality, and he succeeded him, and he was then succeeded by Indira Gandhi. So somehow for that reason, because of I would say because of historians' interest in Nehru and in Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the contributions of the second Prime Minister of India are more or less being ignored by historians, and that is why it required someone to actually do that activity in full. What stands out about Shastri ji's personality is also the fact that if you juxtapose his origins, his humble origins, vis-a-vis the origins of the of his predecessor and successor, his meteoric rise stands out as particularly very interesting because his childhood was I would say at the best a childhood which was a lot of moving around, shifting schools between Prayagraj and Banaras, depending on the financial conditions of the family. There was a lot about Shastri ji's personality itself, which was shaped by his early childhood, which you see. And it was not an easy time for him or his family. And despite those odds, you rise to become the Prime Minister of India says a lot about the person and lot about his family. That was the support base of Shastri ji's life, and he was a out and out family man. So without that kind of a family support, you cannot become the Prime Minister of India. So that is one important aspect that shines. The other aspect is also that Shastri ji had risen through the ranks of the Congress party. and that also strikes as particularly significant. I would say Mr. Sanjeev Chopra has done a great to the contribution to the legacy of Lal Bahadur Shastri by bringing him back to the forefront and the center stage, which a memorial or an institute could not have done. You needed a book like this, and I would like to compliment you, sir, on such a book, because it is very important for students of history, people who take interest in history and politics of this country, to know about all prime ministers of this country and how they have shaped the country or its future. It's very significant that one should put that onto paper. So that, in that sense, I would say it is particularly interesting. There are very interesting anecdotes that stand out as far as his personality was concerned, his early childhood was concerned, that he would, because he did not, his family did not have the money or the resources in his early childhood, he would, outside his school, when other people would enjoy chart, which is, all of us enjoy chart, he would keep looking at the chart counter from a distance, the chart stall from a distance, but never, he was so humble, he was so much self-respecting that he would not ask his friends or anyone for a favor to buy him a basket of chart. Imagine a child wanting to eat the chart and not having it because of the, so it was something that was inbuilt in him from childhood to not ask or demand anything. So that stands out in his personality, which is quite interesting. He also led a very austere life. What we hear today about the importance of austerity, which is a burning requirement for the planet or for our society, and to be driven by austerity, I think in that sense, Shastri ji lived that life. There's a very interesting anecdote that when he was UP Home Minister and he had a salary of 700 rupees, he was invited by Nehru to Delhi. And his wife was very unhappy that the stable income of 700 rupees is going to stop, and we'll again have to shift base to Delhi. So that also says about the women in his family. Women in the family of any big leader are seldom spoken of. So, sir, that is also, I would like to compliment you that you've not reduced women to mere mothers and daughters and wives to mere tokens, but active players in the story. And that says a lot about the style of writing which should be there, about what women in the life of important leaders and what role do they play. Even if they are homemakers, they have a very important role in kind of doing the backroom work. And especially in the life of Shastri ji, his mother, his wife, his daughters, his children had a very important role, because they were constantly up for turmoil in the sense that Shastri ji had very important roles. It was a high pressure job. He had served time in prison couple of times, so he was put through, his body was put through many cycles of not going without food, unhealthy food habits, which is the case of any leader having a high pressure job. So it tells you about the even the leaders and what their bodies are put through in conditions which are very adverse for any person heading such a senior position. Yet he emerges as this person who is a non-controversial figure, and no one really has something nasty to say about Lal Bahadur Shastri ji or his conduct or the conduct of his family members, which stands out as a very important example about public figures and the life that one should have in that sense, because he believed that regardless of the fact that you differed in your views or your ideologies, you could have a good relationship, you could have a conciliatory relationship, you could have different points of disagreement, which he had. Like, he was very upset about the Nehru Purushottam Das Tandon spat. He tried to play the role of a conciliator because that he felt that Tandon had won the Congress presidential election, something again which not many people talk about. And it was much to the displeasure of Nehru, and Nehru did not want to be into that situation and did not want to be a part of this Congress working committee meeting. Shastriji stepped up and tried to play the role of a conciliator. So I think those are important times in history when there is a disagreement between the Prime Minister and the head of the party which is leading the government. And I think those roles need to be discussed. The other aspect was that he also was a contemporary with very important, significant world personalities. And there is a note which the CIA mentions of Lal Bahadur Shastri ji when he assumes the prime ministership of the country, which says that he is someone who's not traveled out of Southeast Asia. He's had a lot of domestic travel, but he's not a prime minister who knows much about the world. That was basically a very, very biased thinking, which usually the CIA or American or Western media had towards politicians who spoke in their vernacular or prioritized vernaculars. So I would say it is important piece of history that has been documented, that he played a role in coming up with the Shastri formula for the languages issue, the linguistic provinces issue. He played the role of someone who would find a solution to problems that were consulting the country. His early years in UP as a member of the ministry made him conscious of the farmers' issues and their problems. And he was very pained also by the developments that were taking place and the pressures that the irregular monsoons and agricultural conditions placed on the food situation in India. So all in all, we come to know about different facets of Shastriji's personality through this book. And I'm very happy that the author has not gone into the details about his death because of his very vocal thing that would dwarf the achievements of Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, and I agree with the author that would have, because we've had enough accounts on that. I think we would like to know about the early childhood, the kind of rise of the former Prime Minister much more, and the work that he did than to the circumstances surrounding his death, which is already very well documented. So I would once again like to thank the author for giving me this opportunity to reflect on this book, and as well on writing a very well-researched, well footnoted book, because I'm seeing it from the lens of a historian. It's very well referenced. So you know that he's taken the pains to go through those documents and come up with a book which is a very easy read. It's a breeze. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for giving me the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pandit. Now I invite Mr. Shekhar Gupta for his remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Sanjeev, for inviting me to do this. I think you figured I am a child of the 60s. Arif Bhai, honor to be on a stage with you. Arif Bhai and I go back to 1985 or thereabouts when the Shah Bano story broke out, and he was among the few honest voices in the Congress who spoke his mind, and that interview we did is still sitting on India Today's archives. That said, it's also the most perfect time, I suppose. Most perfect time in Indian politics is usually not the most perfect time, because most perfect time in Indian politics can't be a boring time, has to be an exciting time. So it's a wonderful time to talk about this book, and also for this book to be released. Congratulations, Sanjeev, for your timing, because this is just when the language controversy has come back to our lives as it had done in the Shastri era, with this almost the same ferocity, except Tamil Nadu is not on fire, right? But at the same time, at that point, there was no news TV to light those fires. So I don't know how Shastriji would have handled those fires. The fact is that Shastriji moved the Official Languages Act in 1963 as Home Minister. He was Prime Minister when the 15-year term of English language as the only official language came to an end. And there was immediate protests. People don't remember what the 60s were like. 60s was India's most dangerous decade, right? This is when DMK, Dravid movement, was a separatist movement. It was not a language movement. It was a separatist movement. And this fed straight into that. This is also the time when the Punjabi Suba movement was at its peak. That had its own separatist stream as well. Naga insurgency was at its peak. Nagas at that point had more than 10,000 automatic rifles, and Indian Army had none. Right? Indian Army was still graduating on to self-loading rifles. It was in that situation that the language issue came up, and his own party criticized him. The Hindi press attacked him. He was a poet. The Hindi poets attacked him because he was seen as a betrayer of Hindi. And what did he do to calm the tempers? He assured Hindi will not be imposed unilaterally, that English will continue to be an associate language, and the decision on how long English will continue will be left to non-Hindi states. That is when a lot in the Hindi heartland, or what we now call as Hindi heartland, but that dominated the national press, called it a betrayal of Hindi and the silence of Shastri. Now, granular detail for a lot of that is available here, because a lot of people will not know. Because you have to understand a leader. It's one thing to say that Shastriji was only there for 90 months, right? How much could he have left behind in 90 months for us to be discussing now? And for us to have such a large audience, I know that Sanjeev has as much draw as Shah Rukh Khan in the city, but some credit goes to Shastriji as well. That in 19 months, sometimes in the game of cricket, in a movie, what makes more impact is a cameo, right? So Hardik Pandya comes and hits 4 sixes, the match turns. Somebody gets 100, that's forgotten. In a movie, somebody comes and does a cameo, that is remembered, the hero is forgotten. So Shastriji's, in a way, was a cameo. 19 months in Indian political history is a cameo. However, if you set those 19 months in his era, and all of that is beautifully detailed in this book should be a textbook on the 60s. This Google Chester Bowles. Chester Bowles was an American liberal. He came to India as ambassador twice. Once, I think in 51, 52 or thereabouts, he became friends with Nehru, then went back, tried his luck with politics, didn't work. At one point, Kennedy got rid of him because he found him to be too liberal, right? And then Kennedy sent him to me to India as ambassador. 63 to 69 he was ambassador. So that entire troubled period he was the ambassador. Now he brought with him what old Raja, Maharajas, invaders, or like Ghazni brought Al-Bruni, right? Somebody who will do the note-taking, a Boswell, right? So he brought along his own Boswell. His Boswell was a man called Selig Harrison, a scholar. Selig Harrison, in that tenure, wrote a book. That became a landmark book at that point. That book was titled India's Most Dangerous Decades. That book basically predicted that India will now break up, that there were so many separatist tendencies, so much external threats, Indians couldn't get along, there were linguistic issues, there were religious issues, there was weak leadership, that India will break up. So 60s was the era of India's trial, and that's the era when India proved to the world that it could go past anything. So 62 we lost a war to China, no dispute about that. 63, the Hazrat Bal crisis took place in Kashmir because Pakistan thought there was a weakness in India. Indian armed forces were being rebuilt. Y.B. Jawan, who also deserves a biography like this at some point of time, he was rebuilding India's armed forces. 1964, Nehruji died, but Nehruji had had a few very difficult months. He was hardly in control. Shastri was learning on the job like that. Then Shastri takes over, and almost immediately, within months after that, Pakistan puts Shastriji to trial by that relatively minor invasion into Cham to check out India's fighting power. Now the pressure at that point would have been great to go all guns blazing at the Pakistanis, but Shastriji had the ability to hold his nerve to say that this is not the time or terrain to fight the Pakistanis. However, he understood that Pakistanis had tested out the Indian side. They had already drawn the wrong lessons, or maybe right lessons from 1962. And with 65 Cham, they thought time had now come to give India a hard knock. Ayub famously said, a Hindu army, Hindu morale can't survive more than a couple of hard knocks, and that day will come. And preparations for 65 war started. And how quickly that was done, how prepared India was, that is the story that has been recorded again and again and again. So language was one. In fact, it was in protest against that language policy that even Sui Subramanian, the agriculture food minister who he had appointed, by way of sparking the Green Revolution. Again, most people don't realize that the founder of the Green Revolution was Lal Bahadur Shastri. All of this in 19 months, right? It was an incredible match-winning cameo. So he started the Green Revolution. He reached out to the Americans. He let the Americans work with Indian farmers, Indian farm research. He had his own IS officers go out to talent hunt and find Dr. Swaminathan, who worked with American scientists. He ducked the criticism from the left at that point, and you can imagine how powerful the left was, particularly because half the Congress, or 2/3 of the Congress was left, that he was not taking help from the Soviets or from the Chinese. And again, the book tells us about that, because he figured that Soviets were not able to feed their own people. They didn't have surplus. They were not producing any surplus. In any case, in Soviet Union, which also included Ukraine then, the land sizes were so humongous. In India, land sizes were small. Also, that the Chinese had just had the great leap forward and the great famines. So there were no inspirations to be had from the communist world. So he was quite open-minded to learning from the Americans. To think about it, this took a lot of moral courage and confidence to do in the early mid-60s. It also took a lot of political risk, because if this had gone wrong, then American hand was everywhere at that point of time. Now, if you read the book, you will see that Sanjeev has recorded with remarkable empathy, the honesty, the great diversity of versions of what happened in Tashkent. Now, Tashkent is one of those stories which will keep WhatsApp burning forever, right? And maybe by tomorrow people will be asking Grok, so Grok, what happened at Tashkent? Or I would like to ask Grok, so Grok, which conspiracy theory is the most popular at Tashkent? So what he's done is, he's taken various versions. Tashkent agreement was a triumph, but Shastri got no praise for that. Pakistani side cursed Ayub because they said this was Pakistan's last chance of winning Kashmir, and he lost it. It is true, this was Pakistan's last chance of winning Kashmir, but he didn't lose it in Tashkent. He had lost it in the battlefield. He lost it on day 3 of Cham, right? Because the moment India opened up at Wagah, he had lost his last chance. He had every advantage. His tanks could fight at night. His fighter planes could fight at night. His fighter planes had air-to-air missiles. His artillery was larger bore and longer range than ours. His tanks were much better than ours. In fact, the tanks our tanks which could sort of equal his tanks, were not even more than a couple of hundred. In spite of that, he lost it on day 3, but he still got because he had spread the mythology that he had won the war, so he got attacked by his press. Shastriji got attacked that he had given up Haji Pir Pass, and that is something for which he is even now attacked, although given the politics now, the BJP politics, they will not attack him, they will attack the Congress system, and if it was somehow possible they will attack Jawaharlal Nehru for it. Fortunately for Nehru and his legacy, he had died earlier. But there were realities at Tashkent that Shastriji faced with great stoicism. And when he figured that people were not happy with what he had done, think about it. Again, the present is a very good guide to the past. See what is Trump trying to do between Zelensky and Putin. He's saying, you two guys are involved in a stalemate. None of you is winning. I'll sit you down. I will tell you, you take this. I will tell you, you take this. This is 2025, right? One of these two countries has the largest number of nuclear weapons in the world, many more than even America, right? A big power can do it. So you can imagine what Shastriji and Ayub were facing in Tashkent with Soviet Union committed to achieving this accord. So Shastriji was unhappy, and the book tells you that he called his family was unhappy, and then he was feeling low, and then Sanjeev tells us that Shastriji scribbled a couplet by Saqib Lucknowi on a piece of paper about how the whole world listened intently, but the storyteller fell asleep, narrating the story. कहानी सुनाने वाला सुना रहा है, लोग सुन रहे हैं, लेकिन सुनाने वाला सो गया. So did he actually have a premonition of what was going to happen at night? We don't know, but those questions remain. We also know that Shastriji had a history of hard challenges before that. This was the era of no ACGs, no stents, right? आजकल तो बच्चा पैदा होते वैक्सीन के साथ कहते हैं 4 स्टेंट भी लगा दो, right? तब तो कोई स्टेंट नहीं थे, कोई बाईपास नहीं था. There was almost no treatment for a heart issue. But think of the innovative things he did. When I opened this book, just coincidentally or maybe serendipitously, the first page that opened had a shorter para towards the bottom that said that Shastriji introduced recruitment of women bus conductors in India. An idea, as he says, ahead of its time, but a step toward breaking the patriarchy. Small but significant things like this never got the credit in historiography. A lot of what he did just got reduced to Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. This was almost reductive. And remember also, one of the first things he did when the ceasefire came, one of the first things he did was to make a visit to the Golden Temple. He went to the Golden Temple, he addressed a rally because he wanted to tell the Sikhs that we were brothers, because the Pakistanis were working on that separatist stream for a long time. Punjabi Suba impulse was very mixed up. And just after his death, we know that Punjabi Suba was created in 1966. I was in class 6, and I remember riots on the street in Bathinda and other places, and the division of Punjab. But he had handled all that and kept things stable while he led India into the war. Other institutions he created. Again, a great leader is one who creates institutions, because Americans say one thing, Americans say many stupid things, but there is one very good thing the Americans say, which is that the only legacy you leave behind is people, right? To that, I will add a modification, because in politics, it's not just people, it's also institutions. So it's the institutions you build. So list the institutions. Again, the book tells you the Prime Minister's office. Can you imagine India did not have a PMO, right? 3 generations have come up, sab kuch PMO se chalta hai. Under Jawaharlal Nehru, there was no PMO. So Shastri set up the PMO, he set up the CBI, the CVC, all of this. And I know other people will tell you, and you must read the book, Border Security Force. BSF was founded in that 19-month period, because everybody realized that when fighting started on the borders, then Punjab Armed Police, Rajasthan Armed Constabulary, Gujarat, whatever armed police it was called, they were manning that all those borders, and they were inadequate to the challenge, that life had changed. And that's when some visionaries were called in from Indian police, the precursor to IPS, And they got together and set up the BSF, and initially by co-opting the armed forces, the armed police battalions from these border states. So one great institutions were built at that time. At this time, what, 120 battalions strong, or maybe even more than that. When I last checked a few years back, it was about 120 battalions strong. So you have a lens, Sanjeev, looking at Shastri's India versus Ayub's Pakistan, that was spoken about earlier, because when Shastri became PM, he had not traveled outside Asia, nowhere. Ayub, on the other hand, was like a global statesman. He was lionized in Washington, right? Americans loved him. Harold Wilson admired him. At that period, the Brits admired Pakistan. They still admire Pakistan a lot more than us. And if they still had their way, they will have Kashmir settled in the way that they want it settled, because they also think there is an institutional memory in Britain that thinks Kashmir is a part of the unfinished agenda of partition, as the Pakistanis think. So you can imagine what he was facing. Ayub was friends with General de Gaulle. At the same time, what was he doing? While he was fighting these wars, preparing for these wars, fighting a really, really nasty insurgency in Nagaland, General Pannu's here, he would have heard from his predecessors in the armed forces what a nasty insurgency that was in Nagaland. People forget, an Indian Air Force aircraft was shot down by the Nagas. An Indian Air Force Dakota was shot down. The crew were taken prisoner, right? And negotiations had to be carried out to rescue the crew. It's just a little sidelight that the commander of the aircraft, an Air Force officer, was a brother-in-law of Devanand at that point, right? Small things keep coming back in history, but this is just to tell you what a tough time it was. So Green Revolution, I told you, he set up the Agricultural Prices Commission because he thought farmers were getting a raw deal. So a lot of what you see now, his Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, wasn't just a slogan. He took it very seriously, and he genuinely thought that Indian farmers were getting a raw deal, and unless he could make their lives better, India was not going to get out of starvation. Now, the notion that Shastri didn't get his due is so dominant among Indians, very dominant. In the Hall of Fame of the Congress Prime Minister from the dynasty, Shastri's legacy didn't get enough sunlight, unfortunately. There is a Shastri Museum in Delhi, but the Indira Gandhi Museum gets more visitors. The PM Museum has corrected that to some extent. There is a whole section on him, so that's not even enough. Maybe 2 years is too short a time to leave a legacy, but books like this surely will fill that gap. And having said that, I will just give you one little personal story about this. I was in class 5 when 65 war took place, and Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, miss one meal a day and grow something in your little kitchen garden. So my school, I was going to school in a very small town those days. Now it's not so small, but still a small town. But 65, you can imagine, a tehsil, which had only one school, one Hindi medium school called Palwal. So the school decided to bring all the students to Delhi. So we all were bused to Delhi to meet Shastri ji and to greet him after the war and to congratulate him. And my mother, she had stitched 6 pajamas for wounded Jawans and plucked spinach from her kitchen garden, which she started at Shastri ji's call, and put that in a lifafa and gave it to me कि Shastri ji को मेरी तरफ से दे देना. Now, a couple of group photos of that visit, my daughter rescued from some old cupboard, and those are still with us, and one of those still features on my tiny Instagram page as well. So Shastri ji touched all our lives, and I am so grateful that a book like this has come out. Please read this. This is like a thriller. 60s was the most thrilling decade in our history, and I hope to God we never live to see a decade more thrilling than that.
That was truly insightful reflection. That was truly Thank you, Sri Shekhar Gupta ji, Dr. Aishwarya Pandit and Sri Adarsh Shastri ji for your thought-provoking perspectives. To deliver the keynote address, it's our distinct honor to invite His Excellency Sri Arif Mahmud Khan, Honorable Governor of Bihar. As statesman of great repute, his reflections will definitely offer invaluable perspectives on Shastriji's enduring leadership and its indelible impact on India's socio-political fabric. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Governor of Bihar.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Author of the book and former director of Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy, Mussoorie, Shri Sanjeev Chopra ji, Director of India International Center, Shri K.N. Srivastav ji, Shri Shekhar Gupta ji, Shri Adarsh Shastri ji, Dr. Aishwarya Pandit. Sunil Bhai is also sitting there, Shri Sunil Shastri. I think Mrs. Shastri is also there. Members of the IIC and young students from different colleges and universities of the NCR, ladies and gentlemen. I am grateful to Dr. Shri Sanjeev Chopra for the kind invite to this event organized to release his new book, The Great Conciliator, Lal Bahadur Shastri and the Transformation of India. For me, it's a great opportunity not only to redeem the promise which I made to him few years back when I visited the academy and he informed me that he is going to write a book on our former Prime Minister Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri. But this is also an opportunity to pay my tributes to the memory of a great Indian who rose to the highest position in the country without any advantages of birth, wealth, or privilege. It was the spirit of democracy deeply entrenched in Indian psyche, inherited from our ancient spiritual and cultural ethos, the functioning reality of Indian democracy, and not merely a theoretical principle that prepared the ground for him to assume the mantle of leadership at a very difficult time in our history. It was due entirely to his force of character and integrity of life. These things enabled him to rise to the top. Shastriji's life was an example of one who firmly believed that if there was a conflict between economic and ethical interest, prefer the ethical and do not bother about the economic. Artha Shastroktam Utsirajya Dharma Shastroktam Acharet. Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri had a social passion. He joined the Servants of People Society established by Lala Lajpat Rai, and after retirement from presidentship of Shri Purushottam Das Tandon, he took it up. That shows that social revolution is a moral protest against the great disparities which prevail and against the instabilities which condition many people who suffer from squalor,
poverty, and disease. All these things indicate that we should have resentment against squalor, poverty, against suffering by ordinary people. That is what we need to possess, and his whole life was an example of that. Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri never acquiesced in the impropriety or the inequity of allowing democracy to function in a way that millions of our people lead barren, fruitless, impoverished lives. His successful initiatives to bring about white revolution and subsequently green revolution paved way for great transformation and benefited the farmers and the country a great deal. Right from the days of freedom movement, he earned a great reputation as a man of organization. Whenever there was any conflict in Congress circles in any province, he was called upon to go, approach the problem, and try to settle it in almost all cases. This is what senior, not today's leaders, his contemporaries, this is what they have said, that in almost all cases he succeeded in reconciling the conflicting people and their interests. But ultimately, when the conflict with Pakistan came, he fought back. He gave instructions to the army not to withdraw and not to relent, but to do their duty. This is the time when people saw a determined leader who rose to his height. He made stirring speeches, made enthusiastic appeals to people, and became a people's hero. He gave energy and vigor to the Indians. He worked them all up and presented to the world a spectacle of the united India, of a consolidated, strengthened India. And in one of his speeches on All India Radio, he said, "I want to state categorically that force will be met with force, and aggression against us will never be allowed to succeed." True to his words, Indian forces met the aggression squarely and knocked on the doors. Just now, you have, the earlier speakers have given you in detail how after Cham he ordered our forces to cross into Pakistan from Wagah border. So he ordered them to knock on the doors of Lahore and cross the Rajasthan border into Pakistan. And in spite of that, he agreed to Tashkent in the hope of finding some permanent peace, as he had earlier agreed on Kutch Tribunal. He told our defense minister, the then defense minister, "We resisted aggression and we fought with all our zeal and earnestness. Now let us fight for peace with the same zeal and earnestness." Here the action of Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri was completely in consonance with ancient Indian ethos, which emphasized that we should be equipped fully with knowledge and wisdom, that is the soft power, and at the same time armed with weapons of war. First, we must use soft power to resist any aggression, but if the aggressor believes only in the law, is not ready to listen to the power of logic and believes only in the logic of power, then we must have the strength to repel the aggressor. Agarta chaturo veda, prashta sasharam dhanu, idam brahmam, idam shastram, shastradapi, shastradapi. Essentially, he was a man of peace, harmony, and reconciliation. But when faced with aggression, he arose and became a valiant hero. But even in this finest hour, he did not try to humiliate the vanquished enemy, but tried to humor them. And I find this most interesting passage in the book, which you have quoted. At Ram Leela Maidan, in his speech, Shastri ji said, सरदार अय्यूब ने ऐलान किया था कि वो दिल्ली तक चहलकदमी करते हुए पहुंच जाएंगे। वो इतने बड़े क्या शब्दों का चयन देखिए, लुक एट द चॉइस ऑफ वर्ड्स। वो इतने बड़े आदमी हैं, अभी ये भी बताया, शास्त्री जी ने बताया 6 फीट 2 इंच बड़े। आई थिंक व्हाट बाय बड़े हियर ही मीन इज हिज लेंथ। तो वो इतने बड़े आदमी हैं, बिकॉज द नेक्स्ट सेंटेंस इज इक्वली मीनिंगफुल। इतने बड़े आदमी हैं और लहीम शहीम हैं। लहीम शहीम इन उर्दू कॉल समवन हु इज़ वेरी बल्की, वेटी। मैंने सोचा कि उनको दिल्ली तक पैदल सफ़र करने की तकलीफ़ क्यों दी जाए, हम ही लाहौर की तरफ बढ़कर उनका इस्तकबाल करते हैं। Brilliant. Now, you know, I was wondering that because we have repeatedly mentioned 19 months, the time for which he was Prime Minister. But actually he was like this all his life. The important decisions which he took as Prime Minister, which were very crucial for the country, that's a different matter. But as far as his temperament and attitude is concerned, he was the same right from the beginning. And from the book, I'm going to quote two lines, Urdu poetry, which he, when he was serving his second term in Faizabad jail, and they used to gather and recite poetry, because Naveen ji from Kanpur was also there, I read there. So some poets were also there. There, Raghukul Tilak ji, according to the book, Raghukul Tilak ji has mentioned this, that Shastri ji recited a verse. I find this very meaningful. And in fact, this reflects his whole life. What a man he was. रंग भरकर फिर इसे रखना है तेरे रूबरू, रंग भरकर फिर इसे रखना है तेरे रूबरू, जिंदगी मेरे लिए खाका है एक तस्वीर का. I mean, it shows his resolve. It shows his high thinking. And if I use the Hindi word, the sankalp which he had. You have a simply outline of a picture. And then he says that to fill the colors in this picture, that is my job. Suto va sut putro, vayo va kova bhavamyaham, Deva yattam kule janma mada yattantu paurusham. Whether I am a charioteer, son of a charioteer or a weaver, or I may be anybody, in which family, under what circumstances I am born, that has been decided by the destiny. But the future which I shape for myself, that is a matter of purusharth. That is what I will do myself. It shows his resolve. And I was wondering, a man of that height, the circumstances under which he was born, where he got all this power from. When he was in the jail, the family found it difficult even to manage the day-to-day expenses. Where he was deriving his strength from. In Indian tradition, we have the concept of ideal man who is endowed with great human attributes, and such persons are called as Dheer Purush. The power which they have, it does not come from their physical strength. It does not come from their financial strength. It does not come even from their intellectual strength. This is not my opinion. How the Indian tradition has described these Dheer Purush. But the Indian tradition recognizes another form of power. And that power is Naitik Bal, Yogic Bal. The moral power. And Bhartari Hari has paid glowing tributes to these Dheer Purush. He says, Nindantu niti nipun yadiva istuvantu, Lakshmi samavistu gachatu va yatheshtam, Adya deva varanamastu, Yugantareva, Nyayat pathat pirvi chalanti padam nadhira. These Dheer Purush, the qualities which they have, they say, let those who know things, let them blame me or praise me. Let prosperity come or go away as she pleases. Let death come just now or after 100 years. But the Dheer Purush, they never deviate from the path of justice. They have the courage of conviction. And undoubtedly, we Indians, we are lucky people, very fortunate that, as repeatedly stated earlier, 60s was a very, very difficult period. And we had such a Dheer Purush to lead us. With these words, I conclude my remarks. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Dhanyavad. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your profound words and for gracing this occasion with your presence. As we draw towards the conclusion of this remarkable evening, I invite Ms. Mekhla Murthy from Bloomsbury to extend the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mekhla Murthy, the editor of the book. And on behalf of Bloomsbury, India, I would like to thank you all for joining us today for the book discussion on The Great Conciliator, Lal Bahadur Shastri and the Transformation of India by Sanjeev Chopra. Today has been a momentous occasion, and it would not have been possible without your contributions, support, and presence. First and foremost, I would like to express our deep gratitude to Mr. Arif Muhammad Khan, the Honorable Governor of Bihar, Mr. Prem Prakash, founder of ANI, Mr. K.N. Srivastav, Director of the India International Center, Mr. Shekhar Gupta, Founder and Editor-in-Chief of The Print. We are also grateful to Mr. Ajay Chaudhary, Mr. Adarsh Shastri, Ms. Aishwarya Pandit, Mr. Ravi Mishra, and Mrs. Rashmi Chopra. The Great Conciliator stands as a testament to the importance of unity and understanding in our complex world. This book has come to life because of your collective support. Thank you all once again for making this evening so special. And make sure you pick up a copy of the book on your way out. Thank you.